Director of Institute of Teacher Education Technical Education Campus IPG-KPT, Mr. Romainur bin Rabu, Dr. Muhammad Nordin bin Abu Bakar, Deputy Director of IPG-KPT, Dr. Tan Tong Hock, Head of Department for Graduate Studies, IPG-KPT, and also the Chairman of the 2022 Lifelong Learning Webinar. Our panelists for today, Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin, Prof. Chow Ti Pong Yong, Mr. Fan Jack, all heads of departments and heads of unit IPG-KPT, pre-service teachers of IPG-KPT, distinguished guests, participants from Malaysia, China and Vietnam. Good morning. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Evelyn and I will be your moderator for this webinar. Allow me to extend a warm welcome to each and every one of you, especially our friends from Vietnam and China. Thank you all for joining us in this webinar entitled Realizing Society 5.0 via Lifelong Learning. To begin our webinar, I would like to invite the Honorable Director of Institute Teacher Education Technical Education Campus, Mr. Romainur bin Rabu, to deliver his opening remarks and to officially open this webinar.
Thank you, MC. A very good morning to Dr. Muhammad Nordin bin Abu Bakar, Deputy Director of Institute Teachers Education Technical Education Campus IPG-KPT, Dr. Tan Tong Hock, Head of Department of Graduate Studies IPG Technical Education Campus, Chairman of the 2022 Lifelong Learning Webinar. Our webinar panel lineup yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin, former Director General of Education Malaysia, Professor Chow Ti Pong Yong, Associate Dean, Faculty of English Linguistics and Literature, Vietnam National University, and Mr. Fan Ji, Headmasters Hua Yang Experimental Primary School, China. All heads of departments and heads of unit IPG-KPT, ladies and gentlemen, participants from Malaysia, China and Vietnam. Dear friends, on behalf of all IPG-KPT, I would like to welcome and thank the webinar panel, especially to yang berbahagia Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin, Malaysia, Professor Chow Ti Pong Yong from Vietnam, and Mr. Fan Ji from China for their willingness to accept our invitation to discuss these topics that is highly relevant today, realizing society's 5.0 via lifelong learning. Indeed, we are very grateful to the Almighty God of enabling us to gather in this lifelong learning webinar. The Malaysian Education Development Plan 2013-2025 outlines the transformation in the national education system based on 11 major shifts. The fourth shift, transforming the teaching profession into a profession of choice, highlights the importance of the teaching profession as an agent of change and progress in the society. In an effort to realize the shifts, the Ministry of Education Malaysia aims to improve the quality of continuing professional development by focusing more on individual needs and school-based training and ensure teachers focus on core teaching functions by reducing administrative burdens. In these regards, in an effort to elevate the teaching profession at the Institute Pendidikan Education, Teacher Education, as a leader in teacher training excellence in Malaysia plays an important role to boost lifelong learning among educators, which will certainly have an impact on the practice of professionalism and educational products in Malaysia. Therefore, Cluster 7 under the IPG Transformation 2016-2025 paves the way of IPG KPT to expand the network of cooperation between IPG and international institutions for the sharing of information and fresh ideas from abroad on the benefits of lifelong learning in education in particular and life in general. Ladies and gentlemen, lifelong learning provides space and opportunities for the community to get education across ages, educational backgrounds, and learning location. Therefore, through lifelong learning, all levels of society have the opportunity to improve their knowledge and skills, in turn contribute to the progress of the country. In this regard, lifelong learning should be an important element in the national education system and empowered by all education institutions and training agencies to produce a society that is able to support the transformation of development in the national education agenda. Furthermore, in the face of globalization and the Industrial Revolution 4.0, the culture of lifelong learning needs to create more than values, new values in the industries and the society. Therefore, today, webinar focuses on
the industries
lifelong learning,
and
which certainly promises knowledge, sharing that gives a high impact in shaping society's participants' perceptions of the needs to realize society's 5.0 in facing and addressing the Industrial Revolution's 4.0. Through lifelong learning, Society 5.0 can use artificial intelligence to analyze various information and information in the virtual world, which in turn will be used for the benefit of the societies in the space of reality. Ladies and gentlemen, through this webinar, it is hoped that the sharing of ideas and thoughts of the panel members will successfully promote the spirit to cultivate lifelong learning among the educational community, such as teachers, trainees, teachers, and lecturers. Therefore, lecturers and teachers who always strengthen their professionalism can provide the best quality of education to students, who in turn will form a society that is not only able to face the current changes in the world, but also as a competitive industry players in the global stage. In addition, the lifelong learning among trainee teachers at the IPG realizes the formation of teachers who are always proactive to improve the quality of themselves, which in turn form the mold of inspiring teachers' desire by the country. In this regard, the role of teachers as agents of transformation of national education will definitely give a greater impact by preparing the community towards the 5.0 generation of society. In other words, lifelong learning in the world of education is the key to preparing Malaysians as a 5.0 society that is able to master life in the virtual and physical world. Before concluding this speech, allow me, the organization, committee, and the entire IPG KPT staff to express our appreciation and gratitude to the webinar panel, especially to Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin, Professor Chow T. Fung Yung, and Mr. Fan Ji for their willingness to share ideas, thoughts, and experiences to promote a culture of lifelong learning in the world of education. Hopefully, this webinar will succeed in transforming the cultural scenario of lifelong learning among the educational community in Malaysia. On that note, and with the recitation of Bismillahirrahmanirrahim, it is my pleasure to declare open the webinar Realizing Society 5.0 Lifelong Learning. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, sir, for the inspiring and informative speech. This webinar is an initiative of the Department of Graduate Studies, Institute of Teacher Education, Technical Education Campus. Participants from Malaysia are required to fill the SPL KPM in the link that will be provided in the comment section. If you have any questions on the topic presented today, you may feel free to type your questions in the comment section. Ladies and gentlemen, lifelong learning is the continuing development of knowledge and skills that people experience throughout their lives. Lifelong learning builds on prior learning as it expands knowledge and skills in depth and breadth. Lifelong learning is a dynamic process that varies depending on individual skills and motivation for self-regulated, generative learning and on life events that impose challenges that sometimes demand incremental adaptive change and other times require frame-breaking change and transformational learning. Therefore, it can be said that lifelong learning is a catalyst for the global development and dynamics in the era of Society 5.0 and have an impact on the education sector, changing the characteristics of learning. The learning process nowadays is influenced by enormous technological breakouts. Learners in the era of 5.0 are technology savvy, and almost all of them have access to technology so they can easily obtain information. It can be said that the future of modern society also presents particular challenges to educational institutions and organizations. To discuss the various measures taken and the challenges that are faced by Malaysia, Vietnam, and China in realizing Society 5.0 via lifelong learning, we have with us our first panelist is Prof. Chow Ti Pong Yong. Prof. Chow Ti Pong Yong is the Associate Dean, Faculty of English, Linguistics and Literature, University of Social Sciences and Humanities, Vietnam, National University, Ho Chi Minh. Prof. Yong obtained her master's in TESOL from USSH Vietnam and her PhD in English Linguistics from UK. Good morning, Prof. Yong. How are you today?
Yes, good morning, Abdul. I'm fine, thank you.
Thank you for joining us today in this webinar, Prof. Our second panelist is Mr. Fan Jie. Mr. Fan Jie is the principal of Huang Yang Experimental Primary School, Tiafu, New Area, Sichuan, China. He graduated from Sichuan University Geography Department. Mr. Fan Jie is now the National Psychological Counselor, National Human Resource Manager, and member of the Sichuan Province Primary and Secondary School. Good morning, Mr. Fan Jie. How are you today, sir?
Good morning, Lima Khao.
Morning, everybody.
Thank you for joining us in this webinar. Our third panelist is Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin. Datuk Dr. Amin bin Senin is the former Director of Education of Malaysia, and he is also the founder and coordinator of Connecting the Dots. Welcome, Dr. Amin bin Senin. There are 3 questions that will be addressed by each of our panelists, and there will be a Q&A session after the discussion. Participants are encouraged to type your questions in the comment section. To begin this webinar, good morning, Datuk Dr. Amin.
Good morning. I have a problem with my computer. I have a echo voice, so I restart again my computer. So should be okay, I think.
Yeah, you're clear now, Doctor.
Okay. Good.
Thank you for joining us in this webinar. To begin this webinar session, I would like to pose the first question to Datuk Dr. Amin. Datuk, how is lifelong learning implemented in the education system in Malaysia? Sorry, Doctor, you can unmute your mic, Doctor. Yeah.
So now you clear? It's okay?
Yes, now it's clear, Doctor.
Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Evelyn, and thank you for other panelists, Mr. Fanji and Professor Yong, involved in this forum today. For the first questions asked by Madam Evelyn, I would like to start my discussion today by sharing my slide. Yeah. can you see my slide, Nene?
Not yet, Doctor.
Okay,
I-
okay, the slide.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Now, it is quite interesting in Malaysia. We have one formal, what you call it, the blueprint for the enculturations of lifelong learning for Malaysia 2011 and 2020. Actually, this blueprint is mooted and led by the Ministry of Higher Education to formalize, not in the sense of mandated lifelong learning, but try to coordinate between different agencies and between different sector to make sure that the lifelong learning become more systematic and more targeted. This blueprint actually try to focus more on the human-centered development, human capital development in Malaysia. That's why the Ministry of Education, including all other stakeholders, whether it's a private or public higher education institute, and all the government agencies that involve, and industries also involved, and non-government organizations involved to produce this blueprint. The basic principle is blueprint actually try to give the opportunities, the second chance opportunities for all citizens in Malaysia, especially for the working group to enhance their education level. And the second principle, actually, this blueprint try to moots the idea for working population to enhance their knowledge and skill according to their job needs. This is, I think, this is two basic principle to make sure everybody, the working group and our society, and also and the public, I think, for the community that want to enhance their level of academic, the second chance for them. Now, in that sense, actually, what we are trying in Malaysia, this is quite a very interesting. The strategies and lifelong education in Malaysia actually acknowledge, and the lifelong learning is the third pillar of capital development, not only in the formal education like the primary and secondary education or higher education, but now in the sense that we are acknowledged the lifelong learning is become the third pillar. And the Malaysian education system, they put the lifelong learning is whether it's a formal or informal or non-formal, become as a part of education system to make sure this learning system is a seamless from the primary to the higher education and up to the higher education. But in the sense, I think we recognize that the important continuous learning is become the culture of the Malaysian, to make sure that our capital development will focusing more towards to develop what we call is a developed country. Now, what is the definition of lifelong learning according to this this blueprint? You see, it's a very targeted. The learning engaged by everyone by age of 15 to 64 and above, except professional student. We caveat for the professional student because they are mandated for them to make sure that they are continuously enhance their professional career in the sense. But the rest, we are focusing more on to the 15 to the 64 because this is the working group in Malaysia. 15 and 64, and about 70%, 76%, our population actually in the working group, 15 to 64. This is why this blueprint actually targeted for this, the working group. And of course, the community we will involve, and we can see with the strategy we are using the non-formal, actually non-formal learning generally take the form of workplace and on-the-job training programs. This is mandated to actually to the private company, even to some of the government agency, to make sure that they are giving the opportunities for their workers at various level, whether it's a vocational or executive training, to make sure they can enhance their knowledge, their skill, and whatever, to make sure they are really competent to do their job. This is the non-formal. It's more structured, and some is more toward the accreditations or recognition by some certificate or whatever. But the informal part, what they call it, the informal learning activities take place for typical reason for improving one's quality of life, occur at the initiative individual level, but according to their personal interests. And the other one, not only the individual, we also recognize this the community-based programs that address diverse social problems and meet universal needs of the community. Yeah. And so this is for the informal. It's not unstructured actually, not unstructured activity, not towards the accreditation or certifications, but more towards to fulfill the individual needs, whether they try to enhance their knowledge or their skills or whatever, to make sure they are really, competent in their life. And some community-based program, actually, they address the social problem or the universal needs, whether it's a career or this is some problem in their community. So they are giving some kind of courses towards the community to make sure they can address the problem. This is two strategy that's using by our learning, lifelong learning inculturations in our blueprint. And so again, actually, one of the most important thing, we are acknowledged, we are recognized that the lifelong learning is very important to the capital, the human capital in Malaysia. I think this is quite interesting. I think for the beginning, it's okay. And I hand over again to the Madam Evelyn to continue our discussion. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you, Dato', for the enlightenment on the implementation of lifelong learning in the education system in Malaysia. Now we will move on to our second panelist. Prof. Yong, could you share with us how is lifelong learning implemented in the education system of Vietnam?
Hello, everyone, again. Yes, thank you, Admin, for the question and the sharing of Dr. Admin. In Vietnam, we have the same kind of situation in that we also prioritize education, and building learning society is our goal. Very early in 2005, the government has adopted a strategy to create a learning society. And we build this learning society based on formal education, vocational education, distant education, continuing education, and community learning center. Up to now, we had lots of institutions that provide the distant learning and blended learning for everyone. We had a project to build the learning society from the period 2011 to 2020, and with the criterion that we try to ensure necessary conditions for everyone to learn at different levels throughout their life. And the state will take responsibility in financing the compulsory education, like primary education. And some implementation has been carried out throughout this period, such as restructuring the education system, developing new curriculum, or improve, like he said, that improve the quality of assurance systems, or we try to renovate administrations and financing. Generally, all kinds of learnings like formal learning, non-formal learning, and informal learning are facilitated and encouraged. We acknowledge that the importance of building reading culture in the society. We have a CMO Center for Lifelong Learning, and because in order to encourage people to to join, to take part in different courses for diploma, courses for degree or non-degree, for example. So we held a lot of book events like book day, book street, or book week in order to raise learners, to raise everyone awareness of the importance of the development of knowledge and skills. We also aim to organize different activities in the libraries. We have activities in the museums and culture centers as well. And right now we have up to, according to recent statistics, we have up to 12,000 community learning centers operating nationwide in order to help learners to come to read and to get information. This learning center can also offer vocational training courses for everyone in order to improve the quality of life as well as their employability. We try to help them to access of books, for example. So in the two big cities like Hanoi and Ho Chi Minh City, we build a mobile library for the blind people. Yeah, still is at the initial phase, but then it's still running, and it shows some effective factors on the readers in general. What we can see is that not just the university offer courses. It could be distant learning courses, it could be blended learning courses, but then those learning community are the institution, are the sector that approach closer to people of different learning level. And the project in that period, we also aim to have around 70% of the laborers, to join different courses to improve their education. We also have kind of programs to encourage officials and public servants to learn foreign language, because with foreign language they can easily get involved in different courses or get onto the library and learn themselves or develop their own learning skills. Also, besides the foreign language, we have also the information technology courses for everyone. Of course, it's not nationwide, because in some rural areas it's not as developed. Internet is not easily accessible in those areas, so there are some limited. At university level, for example, we try to offer students with the life skills courses. We teach them life skills courses, and we can see that it has gained those projects. It has gained some significant achievement in broadening the scope of education, in diversifying the modes of delivery, and developing networks for education institutions. Yeah, those are the things that we can see and are continuing doing. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Prof. Yong. Now we can see how China implement their lifelong learning in their education in realizing Society 5.0. We can hear from Mr. Fanjie.
今天能参与我们三峰的教育论坛。关于终身学习是如何在我国教育体系中实施这一问题，我首先要谈一谈我们国家的教育的一些发展和基本的理念。
It is my great honor to participate in this tripartite education forum today on how lifelong learning is implemented in our education system. Let me begin by our country.
2022年，中国已进入社会主义现代化建设的新阶段，在世界需要应对当前和未来的挑战的背景下，社会需要向学习型的社会进行转型。
In 2022, China has entered a new stage of socialist modernization. In the context of the current and future challenges in the world, our society needs to transform into a learning-based world.
对终身教育比较具体和普遍的说法是，人们在一生中所受到的各种培养的总和。 我们把终身教育理解为学前教育、基础教育、高等教育、职业教育、成人教育的总和。我们也把它称为一个整个的终身教育的板块体系。
Generally speaking, lifelong education is the sum of all kinds of training that people have received in their life. It is understood as the sum of education received in preschool, primary, and secondary school, college, university, as well as the training in the vocational institutions, which we call it a plate system.
为实现终身学习在教育体系中的有效实施，我们采取了一系列的措施。下面由我们学校的罗云崇院长对学前教育做一个交流，我们教务处的朱静主任对职业教育、社区教育领域做一个交流。完了以后，我对基础教育方面给大家做一个交流。下面我们有请罗院长给大家讲解一下我们学前教育板块的内容。
In order to effectively implement the lifelong learning in education system, we have taken a series of measures. Luo Yingqiu, principal of Guiyang Experimental Kindergarten, will give us a brief introduction of preschool education in Tianjin area. Zhu Jing, Dean of Studies, will make an explanation of the vocational and community education of our area. Then I will introduce primary and secondary parts. First, let's welcome Principal Luo Yingqiu about preschool education.
学前教育奠基终身学习的基础。
Preschool education lays the foundation for lifelong learning.
学前教育是终身学习和发展组成部分，是我国学校教育和终身教育的奠基阶段。
Preschool education is the beginning of lifelong learning and development, an important part of China's national education system. The foundation stage of school education and lifelong education in China.
在终身学习思想指导下，学前教育多措并举。
Under the guidance of the thought of lifelong learning, preschool education takes many measures at the same time.
科学规划布局，调整范围结构，推进学前教育普及普惠、安全优质发展。
We scientifically plan the layout and adjust the structure of our kindergarten. We are promoting the safe and high-quality development of preschool education.
优化经费投入结构，健全学前教育成本分担机制，主要用于扩大普惠性资源，补充配备教师，提高教师待遇，改善办学条件，为建设高质量学前教育体系提供保障。
We optimize the investment structure and improve the cost-sharing mechanism of preschool education. It is mainly used to expand inclusive resources, supplement the allocation of teachers, improve the training of teachers, and improve the conditions for running the kindergarten, so as to provide guarantee for the construction of high-quality preschool education system.
完善教师培养体系，健全教师培训制度，严格教师队伍管理，切实提高教师专业水平和科学保教能力，成为奠基幼儿终身学习的指导者。
We improve and perfect the teacher training system and strictly manage the teacher team, effectively improve teachers' professional level and scientific education ability, and make them become the mentor of laying the foundation for children's lifelong learning.
规范课程建设与管理，提高保教质量，尊重儿童学习规律，确立以儿童为本的课程理念，丰富课程资源，改进课程实施，改革课程体系。
We standardize the curriculum's construction and management to improve the quality of care and education, respect the children's learning rules, establish a child-centered curriculum concept, enrich curriculum resources, improve curriculum implementation, and reform curriculum evaluation.
整合多方资源，引导家长、社区支持儿童学习。幼儿园与家庭、社区密切合作，与小学相互衔接，综合利用各种教育资源，共同为幼儿创造良好学习条件。
We integrate multiple resources to guide parents and communities to support children's learning. Our kindergarten works closely with families and communities, connects with the primary school, make comprehensive use of various educational resources, and jointly create good learning conditions for children.
幼儿教师做终身学习的典范。
We promote teachers to be good role models for lifelong learning.
教师应该成为学习先进学前教育理论，了解国内外学前教育改革与发展的经验和做法，优化知识结构，提高文化素养，具有终身学习与持续发展的意识和能力，做终身学习的典范。
Teachers should learn advanced preschool education, both at home and abroad. They should optimize their knowledge structure and improve cultural literacy. They also try to have the awareness and ability of lifelong learning and sustainable development and be a good model of lifelong learning.
好的，谢谢蒙院长。
Okay, thank you so much, Principal Luo.
接下来我们有请朱静主任和大家一起交流我们职业教育、社区教育和开放大学促进我们优质学习的发展情况。
Next, let's welcome Dean Ju to give us a speech of vocational and community education of our new area.
Okay, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I talk about the vocational and community education of our area. 谢谢我的翻译。目前呢，在我们天府新区辖区内有一所中等的职业学校，一所高等的职业院校，一所社区的教育学院。一直以来，我们天府新区非常的重视职业教育与基础教育的融合发展。
At present, we have one secondary vocational school, one higher vocational college, and one community education college in Sichuan Tianfu New Area, southeast of China. Our area has always attached the great importance to the integrated development of vocational education and basic education.
职业学校呢，每年会针对学前教育、义务教育阶段的学校，开设一些职业体验和劳动教育课程，面向全区的中小学开放。例如餐饮服务、手工制作、汽车原理、数控编程等等，通过丰富的职业体验课程来提高孩子们的职业认知，尽早的树立职业理想。
Vocational schools offer professional experience and labor courses for both preschool and compulsory education. That means 9 years from primary school to junior high school every year. These courses are open to primary and secondary schools in our area. For example, catering service, handcrafting, automobile principles, numerical control programming, etc. Thanks to such plentiful professional courses, children in our new area professional can probably establish their earlier understanding of career.
在高中阶段，天府新区开设有职普融通实验班，职业学校的孩子有机会到普通学校就读，到了普通学校的孩子也可以选择到职业学校就读，以便孩子们选择适合自己的教育。当然，无论是职业教育还是普通教育，大部分的孩子都会选择最后到高一级的学校，也就是大学来就读，完成大学的学业。职业学校还利用专业的优势，承担了辖区内的职业技能培训，协助就业和劳动保障部门开展就业培训和在职的继续教育等等。
In high school, our area has set up an integration experimental class where vocational students have access to courses of senior high. Meanwhile, students of high school can have vocational classes too. Thus, children can choose the education that suits them. Frankly, whether it is vocational education or general education, most students are willing to be admitted in a higher level school, or we can call it university, to complete their studies. Besides, the vocational school uses its professional advantages to undertake the skills training, conduct employment training with the help of labor and social security departments, and carry out on-the-job continuing education within our area.
此外，为了搭建家校社会的协同育人的桥梁，树立终身学习的理念，建设学习型的城市，天府新区成立了社区教育学院，指导我们辖区内9个社区教育学校、老年教育学校、119个社区学习中心，通过开设丰富的社区课程，培育学习型的团队，比如艺术团队、读书会等等，开设网络学习平台等，服务早期教育、青少年的校外教育、老年教育、家庭教育，依托成都开放大学，开展成人非学历教育，营造出人人皆学、处处能学、时时可学的终身学习氛围。
In addition, our area has established a community education college so as to set up a foundation on school, community, and society, publicize the concept of lifelong learning, and build a learning city. The college is responsible for directing 9 community education schools, 1 senior education school, and 119 community learning centers within the area. The College of Community Education provides related courses and services for pupils, teenagers, and the elderly and family. And now it has created a lifelong learning atmosphere in which everyone here and can learn from time to time.
谢谢朱主任。
Okay, thank you for so much, Dean Zhu.
在基础教育方面，我想和大家分享下面的一些内容。
In terms of basic education, I would like to share the following with you.
在终身学习理念的指引下，基础教育采用了多措并举。
First, under the guidance of lifelong learning, we have taken multiple measures in basic education.
主要有以下一些方面：第一是改革教育教学的制度，扩大学习者对教育选择的机会。
We have reformed the education and the teaching system and expanded the opportunities for learners to choose education.
二是改革教育的内容、教学的方法和教育的评价，使学校从单一的知识传授转向学习者终身学习打好基础，强调培养学生的学习兴趣、学习能力，还有实践能力和创新精神。
We have improved the education content, teaching methods, and education evaluation so that schools from merely imparting knowledge to laying a solid foundation for lifelong learning. We emphasize on cultivating students' learning interest and ability, practical skills, and innovative spirit.
推进办学体制的改革，实现我们办学的途径多样化，充分调动和发挥部门、行业以及企业、社会机构和社会成员参与和支持教育发展。
We promoted the reform in the school running system and diversified the ways of running schools. Social institutions such as departments, industries, and enterprises, as well as members of society, should be fully mobilized to participate in and support education.
同时，加强学校的开放性，充分发挥教育资源的潜力，为广大社会成员提供更多的学习机会。
We have strengthened the openness of schools, given full play to the potential of the school education resources, and provided more learning opportunities for members of society.
同时，加强教师的终身学习， 建立各种学校，特别是基础教育学科的学习质量监测和评估体系。
We emphasize teachers' lifelong learning and establish a scientific learning quality testing and evaluation system for all kinds of schools, especially basic schools.
二是形成我们教育网络，开发学习的资源，加快教育信息化的建设。
Second, we have formed an education network, developed the learning resources, aiming to speed up the construction of education informatization.
主要体现一是以学习中心模式为主要根据，积极发展现代远程教育和培训，满足不同年龄段和不同社会背景群体的学习需求。
Based on learning-centered model, modern distance education and training are actively developed to meet the learning requirements of different groups and different social backgrounds.
二是充分发挥社会各方面的积极性，开发优质的数字化的教育资源，动员和集中全国优秀的专业人士、专业机构，整合开发不同类型的学习群体的数字化网络资源平台，实现我们优质教育资源的共享。
We have coordinated the social activities so as to develop high-quality digital education resources, mobilize and concentrate on outstanding professionals and professional institutions nationwide, integrate and develop digital online education, resources of different types of learning groups, and realize the sharing of high-quality teaching resources.
三是努力提高全体公民的信息素养和信息化的意识。
Last but not least, we strive to improve the information awareness of all citizens.
我们的理解，终身教育的途径是多元的，以供每个人根据自身的需求和愿望去选择。
The ways of lifelong education are diverse for each person to choose according to their own needs and desires.
终身教育的内容也是多样的，既包括专业化的教育，也包括社会的、文化的、生活方面的教育内容。
The contents of lifelong education should be diverse, including professional education, social, cultural, life, and other aspects of education.
终身教育的最终目的是提高人的素质，提高人的生活质量，促进社会的发展，建立学习型的社会。Thank you.
The ultimate purpose of lifelong education is to improve people's quality, their quality of life, and the development of society, and then establish a learning society. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fanjet, for the explanation on the implementation of lifelong learning in the education system in China. We are indeed very astonished to hear the various measures taken by Malaysia, Vietnam, and China in implementing lifelong learning in the education system. In Malaysia, we have our own lifelong learning blueprint, okay, where working community and the public are given preference, okay, to choose their vocational to further their vocational studies. And in Vietnam, the reading culture is given preference, and various activities are held in the museum and libraries to promote lifelong learning. And we also heard in China, where lifelong learning begins at a very early age in preschool level, yeah. And also community. They have a community education college where learners are able to choose their own field of interest. That's an interesting thing that we noted. Okay, let's continue to hear what are the different measures taken by Vietnam, China, and Malaysia for the realization of Society 5.0. For this, can we start with you, Prof. Yong? Through the implementation of lifelong learning in the education system of Vietnam, what are the different measures taken for the realization of Society 5.0? Over to you, Prof.
Yeah. through the process of developing and building lifelong learning society, we have gained some, achievements. But then, for example, like at the moment, we have up to around tens of thousands of learners attending working places and distant learning programs at the tertiary level. That is what we can see. However, there are some of the things that we can still hear that, for example, we are still attached to the traditional mode of theoretical and practical framework. So the content of the educations are still curriculum driven. We learning and focusing too much on the acquisitions and repetition of knowledge, and the delivery of education is still limited with the focus on the formal institution, formal training, rather than informal or non-formal education. And cooperation between education sectors and employment sectors is very limited so far. Cooperation here is still very limited, and we are trying to make we're trying to train and to make education responsive to the social needs, right? By doing some kind of survey to see what they really want to study, for example. And at the operational level, non-formal or informal education they do not receive equal attention compared to formal education. And so through the process of implementing lifelong learning, we have taken some of the measure. For example, we try to strengthen the distant learning courses at university levels. At the moment, we have around 21 university or institution that offer distant learning courses, and we try to integrate information and communication technology in all of the education centers. Another measure that we also taken out, for example, we try to define the learner needs, and we try to diversify the curriculum accordingly. Foreign language is also an aim for us, because with the language they can approach educations in different sources. So we try to strengthen the foreign language and information technology center to provide learners and teachers with the training so that they are ready to prepare or to teach in online courses or the blended learning as well. And another problem we are facing now is the budget deficit. And one measure in order to overcome this deficit is to call for the social participation to education. So private sectors have right now contributed greatly in the lifelong learning, and we need more contribution from private sectors. They are present at the moment. Private sectors are present at all levels of formal schoolings. This will open more opportunities for learning, and they are ready to contribute to the social organizations, for example. And yeah, that are some of the measures that we have taken so far to deal with some of the things while we are implementing the lifelong learning society strategies. Yeah.
Thank you, Prof. Yong, for the highlights given. Next, we hear from Mr. Fanjet. Mr. Fanjet, through the implementation of lifelong learning in the education system of China, what are the different measures taken by China in the realization of Society 5.0?
OK，教育系统内的，无论是一线的老师，还是我们学校的管理层，他都需要继续终身学习，顺应社会的发展，紧跟时代的步伐。其中最主要的路径还是我们的学历提升和继续教育。学历提升就是根据学习所获得的更高的学历，而继续教育却有很多不同的学习方法和方式。根据国家的政策，结合学校发展的实际，华阳实小在继续教育方面一共采用了4项措施。
Both frontline teachers and school administrators need lifelong learning so as to adapt to social development and keep pace of times. In terms of lifelong learning, the main path are academic upgrading and continuing education. Academic upgrading is to attend higher education qualification, while continuing education has many different ways. According to the national policy combined with the actual social development, our schools have taken 4 major measures in continuing education.
一是校本研修，
The first one, school-based training.
校本研修是结合学校的实际情况，我们内容以学校的需求和教学方针为中心，社会生活，目的是提高教师的专业业务水平和教育教学能力。所以这项措施要求教师和学校紧跟时代的步伐，在不断的探索和研究中，实践出一条能够培养新时代青少年的持续发展的道路。
School-based training is centered on the needs and teaching policies of the school, based on the direct experience of students and closely related to students' own life and social life, in the hope of improving the professional level and teaching ability of teachers. Therefore, this measure requires teachers and schools to keep up with the development of the times and during the continuous exploration and research, on a sustainable development path that can cultivate young people in the new era.
二是师徒接对，
The second one, mentor-apprentice pairing.
师徒接对从字面的理解，主要是老教师和新教师一结成对子。新教师向老教师学习丰富的教学经验和知识，但是师徒接对的意义不仅仅在于此。新教师新颖的视野和顺应时代发展的技术，也为我们的老教师带来了新鲜的教学血液。以老扶新和以老带新的接对方式，可以让教师队伍一直充满活力，也能拓展老师们的视野，紧跟大数据的时代，不断更新自己的教学能力和教学的一些方法。
Mentor-apprentice pairing is literally one-on-one pairing between experienced teachers and new teachers, and the new teachers can learn from experienced teachers. Apart from that, new teachers know more version, and technology can also bring fresh teaching ideas to old teachers. Such method can also make the teachers' team full of vitality, expand the horizons of teachers, and constantly update their teaching skills and teaching media.
三是课题的开发，
The third measure, academic study research.
小课题的开发有助于聚焦具体的教学问题，解决教学中的实际困难。在信息化的今天，有很多技术性的问题值得老师去探索和研究。学校力求做到每一个老师有一个小课题，通过课题的研究和探索，对时代的研究以及探索，有助于帮助老师与时俱进，适应时代的发展。
Academic study research helps to focus on specific teaching problems and find practical solutions. Today, there are still many technical problems worth exploring. Our school strives to make each teacher have a small research subject. Such study is also an exploration of the times. It helps teachers to keep pace of the times and adapt to the development of the times.
四是实施信息技术的2.0工程。
The fourth measure is Information Technology Engineering 2.0.
信息技术工程2.0的提出是中国教育部教育信息化2.0的行动计划。这个计划是2018年的4月13号提出来，是教育信息化的一个升级。这个计划的提出，让我们教育行业有了很大的转变。
Based on the Education Informatization 2.0 Action Plan, is issued by the Ministry of Education of the People's Republic of China. Information Technology Engineering Group 2.0 was officially proposed on April 13, June 2018, which can be regarded as an upgrade of education informatization and lead to the following changes in our education industry.
过去我们将知识资源数字化，平面资源 转变。
In the past, we digitalized knowledge resources and three-dimensional flat resources, but it is not enough. We should broaden our perspective of the internet resources. And now we have the following changes.
首先是技术素养的转变，
The first one, change in the view of technology literacy.
还有教育技术观的转变，
Change in concept of educational technology.
以及我们发展动力观的转变。
Change in the concept of development momentum.
同时还强调我们教育治理水平的转变，
In the same time, we focus on change in education governance.
还有我们思维类型的转变。
Change in thinking.
当今教育面临的问题之一是思维方式还停留在工业时代，我们的思维类型急需从工具型的思维转向人工智能的思维。
One of the problems facing today is that the way of thinking is still stuck in the industrial age, and our thinking type urgently needs to shift from instrumental thinking to artificial intelligent thinking.
谢谢。
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fanjay, for the input on the measures taken by China for the realization of Society 5.0. It is interesting to hear that China has an action plan 2.0 and artificial intelligence are given preference as well. Now, let's continue to hear from Dato Dr. Amin. Dato, through the implementation of lifelong learning in the education system of Malaysia, what are the different measures taken for the realization of Society 5.0? Over to you, Dato.
Thank you, Madam Ablin. Quite interesting. Before I answer that question, I want to give some backgrounds of my thought about these things. I think we should clear about the Society 5.0. It's in the future society, but we are starting to, to prepare our generation to make sure they are really functionable and the kind of society the 5.0. Everybody now quite agree that society 5.0 is based on the what they call it, the digital transformations. We are talking about the artificial intelligence. We are talking about the robotic, Internet of the Thing, and economic. They are talking now about the blockchains. These all the kinds of characteristics that will develop a society 5.0 in the future, and starting from now. You see, I want to give some backgrounds about the developments about how this society 5.0 to be developed. I quite agree with some of the opinion proposed by Japan when they are trying to develop a society 5.0. They are talking about how to make sure the society become the human-centered. We are not try to develop society or a persons or citizen to compete with the artificial intelligence or compete with the robotic or with the whatever technologies. We have to develop the human as the potential is human to become more human. That's why one of the thing to make sure that can be developed the human-centered society, we must come back again to the very basics of our schooling system. How in our schooling system, we try to make sure that the passions of knowledge to become a part and parcel of the society. You cannot establish the learning, lifelong learning society if there is no passion to learning. But the kind of learning must be suited and really whatever is functionable in the society 5.0. You see, from our experience, our school now is developed 300 years ago. The framework of our school is developed from the framework of 300 years ago, according to the what we call it is the factories assembly lines model. It's a very uniformity. Every student become mechanical and less developed to the personalizations of education. We are really embrace what they call the standardized education in our system. This why the question is whether this kinds of school, the all grammar of schooling really can what you call really can produce a student that can perform better in future society. But I don't think so. And that's why in Malaysia, we are trying to gradually try to change the perspective of education, especially in schooling, to make sure that there are really passion to lifelong learning. Some of the knowledge and the capacity and the skills really, really applicable to the future. One of the thing in our curriculum now, we are start now inculcate what we call higher order thinking skill. The higher order thinking skill actually one of the part to make sure that our student really not only they are good in the problem solving, the higher order thinking, the problem solving, but the most important thing for the future society is the creativity. This is the part I think we are different with the machine learning. We are different with the robotic. They can, I think you cannot compete with the computer because they can remember more, can retrieve more knowledge or information faster than us. I think we can compete it. But the only thing we can develop ourselves as a human to make sure they can function in our society, to make sure the creativity, because computer, of course, for the time being, I don't know, in the future, for the time being, there is no creativity for the computer. They are really, what they call, really based their logical thinking on the something is a previous knowledge. The capture, storage, and the machine learning. But in human, the creativity, there is not linear. You know, the creativity is something is the unique to the human. That's why in the society, 510, the creativity is become the in thing of the thing you must develop in our student. And that's why, but again, is our school system now really inculcate the creativity? This is the first question. That's why in Malaysia, we try to make sure that our education system and the schooling system try to create the more creative student to engage. There are more something, not the usual way of problem solving. Even in problem solving also we try to make sure that not only they are trying to solve what we call the near applicable transferable of solving the problem. The near one meaning what? In our classroom we try to give them what we call is the scenario. This is really already happened. Yeah, you set the scenario, the problem solving, the mathematical questions. It's a frame and the experience of the student. But in the future, actually, we have to solve the problem. You must solve the problem. The context of the problem actually you're not experienced before, not in the school, not in the real life. This is the society for 5.0. So if you want to solve the problem, the creativity must start from solving the unfamiliar problem that will occur in the future. But our students ready for that or not? They are really, get used with the problem that is in the textbooks and the workbooks, really setting problem, but not the unfamiliar problem. Meaning that the file transfer the real problem in their life. That's why in our curriculum try to make sure that we are what they call try to start with the authentic learning. Authentic learning mean what? Meaning that you relate your knowledge, your skill, your disposition to make sure that you are solve the real problem in your life. With the third thing, I think, to make sure that this is the measure we try to start foresee develop our student is what I call it is the fast transfer. Yeah? The fast transfer, this means you must have some skill, the thinking skill, but the thinking skill you become a disposition. Disposition become it's a part, a puzzle, the character yourself. You know, in our school now, we give them some of the skill and they acquire the skill, but in the real life, the skill is not applicable. They don't use the skill. This means the skill not become a character, not become a disposition of the student. Now, our challenge in the school, how to make sure this kind of school, this kind of skill, they use in the real life. Not only they can acquire that skill, but use in the real life. That's what I call the disposition. I think our school system must try to make sure that every knowledge, that every skill acquired by student become at the disposition of the student, become the character of the student. Now you see in our real life now, some students they have a problem, they didn't use the knowledge, they didn't use the skill they acquired in the school. That's our problem now. It's the lifelong learning actually try to make sure how you acquire the knowledge become relevant to your life and you use in your real life. I think this is the measure that we have tried to make sure that we can produce the student is a functional in our future society, what they call it, the human-centered society and the 5.0. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Amin, for the very detailed explanation on how creativity and problem solving plays an important role in the realization of Society 5.0. It is indeed very informative to hear the measures taken by Malaysia, Vietnam, and China to make Society 5.0 a reality. Participants, please feel free to post your questions in the comment section for our panelists. In our final session, let's hear from our panelists the challenges faced to make Society 5.0 a reality and what are the initiatives that are taken to overcome or at least to mitigate these challenges. For this, can we start with Mr. Fanjet? Mr. Fanjet, what are the challenges faced by China to make Society 5.0 a reality? And what are the initiatives taken to overcome these challenges? Over to you, Mr. Fanjet.
OK，信息爆炸和大数据以及智能化的飞速发展，给人类带来了诸多的便利，但与此同时，也给人类带来了很多负面的一些效应和潜在的危机。如何使信息化的资源得到有效的利用，提高信息的质量，已经成为世界性一个亟待解决的网络问题。所以，优化信息资源的开发、管理，使信息被有效的利用，是关键的问题之一。
The rapid development of information explosion, big data, and intelligence has brought out much convenience to human life, but at the same time, it has also brought negative effects and potential crises to our society. How to make effective use of information resources and improve the quality of information has become a worldwide network stubborn disease that needs to be cured. Therefore, optimizing the development and management of information resources is one of the key issues to make effective use of information.
教育现代化离不开信息技术的发展，最大的挑战是资源分配的不均。针对这一挑战，我们国家采取了一系列的保证性的一些成效。
The modernization of education is inseparable from the development of information technology, and the biggest challenge is uneven distribution of resources. In response to this challenge, our country Our country's Ministry of Education has implemented a series of safeguard policies.
一是各地区均衡的扩增优质的教育资源，新建义务教育学校，投入资金实施设施设备的配套，逐步完善学校的基础设施的建设。
The first policy is to balance expansion of high-quality educational resources and hardware facilities in all regions, especially in remote or rural areas.
努力实现我们城乡教育的均衡发展，统筹推进学校接对帮扶的活动，确定接对的学校借助网络教研的平台启动空中的同步课堂，学校的均衡发展水平得到了提升。
Efforts to achieve balanced development of urban and rural education, coordinate and promote the school parent assistance activities, identify paired schools, and start the construction of synchronized classrooms with the help of online teaching and research platforms, so as to promote the development of schools in remote areas.
其实教师队伍的素质主要是专业化发展水平，组织干部、老师开展研修培训。
Improve the quality of the teaching staff, improve the professional development level of cadres and the teachers, and organize training for cadres and for teachers, including remote rural teachers.
我们学校也采取了相应的一些措施。
To meet this challenge, our school has also taken the following measures.
一是开展集团化办学，
The first, carry out a group-based education.
第二是积极响应体育共享中心的机制，
Second, actively respond to mechanism of the sports sharing center.
通过探索体教融合、创新建立体育教师的共享机制，广纳了退役的世界冠军、退役的运动员、教练和优秀的体育老师到我们天府新区教师共享中心，通过全区的排课走校的方式，去到小学担任体育老师。目前吸纳了奥运冠军张珊在内的前5名冠军、退役的运动员和教练员，集结到各项目的奥运冠军和运动员，通过共享的方式，在我们新区开展教学。
Actively responds to the mechanism of the sports sharing center by exploring the integration of sports and education. Innovatively establish a sharing mechanism for physical education teachers and recruit retired world champions, retired athletes, coaches, and outstanding physical education teachers to the teachers sharing center of new area physical education. Through the method of different PE teachers go out to different schools in one area. Teachers go to primary and secondary schools to teach. At present, more than 1,000 champions, including Olympic champion Zhang Shan, required athletes and coaches, will be assembled to open mobile learning.
三是开设3天风云的课程，为丰富学校的课程建设，推进信息技术和教育教学的深入融合，借助大数据、人工智能等新兴技术，更新学生的学习方式，拓宽学生的视野，让学生轻松的学习。现在我们新增的3门课程有57加 MR 的人工智能全息课，还有 AI 的美育课程和 AI 的英语书法课。
Create a third-order enrichment course in order to better enrich the school curriculum, where our school promotes the in-depth integration of information technology and education and teaching, and emerging technologies such as big data and artificial intelligence to upgrade students' learning methods, broaden students' horizons, to make them learn easily and inspire students to advocate science, and to cultivate students' all-around development of morality, intelligence, basic beauty, and labor. We offer 3 times the courses as follows. Number 1, 5G plus MR, Artificial Intelligence, Holographic Science, and Technology Innovation course. Number 2, AI Athletic Education Dance class. Number 3, AI Chinese Market Calligraphy class. Thank you.
谢谢。
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fanje, on the input. It is very knowledgeable to know that China has placed importance on the artificial intelligence and also organizing training for teachers in the rural areas. Thank you very much, Mr. Fanje. Now let's hear from Datuk Dr. Amin. Dato, what are the challenges faced by Malaysia to make Society 5.0 a reality, and what are the initiatives taken to overcome these challenges? Over to you, Dato.
There is many challenges actually, Blin, but I just try to highlight one of the real challenges and real challenge and our effort to make sure the long life learning to become a part and parcel of our life is the equality gap or the equity gaps. You know, one of the blessing in disguise about the pandemic, the pandemic really, you know, this pandemic really tests our education system, not only in Malaysia, all over the world. And I can see, safely I can say is that most of the education system, if not all, most of the education system in the world actually fail to address, you know, the effects of the pandemic to the education, especially for the schooling system, because our school system actually is not be able to give the education to our student if they are not in the schools, they are at home. Because our paradigm thinking now about education or schooling, for example, the student must be at the schools, you know, at the school. But if they are not in the school, because our system actually address education at the schools, not out of the school. Now the pandemic really tests the stress test. Actually, we are failed to make sure that our student out of school get education, the proper education. Now, what is our measure? All over the world, the measure actually try to make sure the connectivity is part and parcel giving education to the student at home. But you see, because the problem of the equality, the equity, I'm not thinking, I quote here, one of the analysis made by the Linda Darling-Hammond from US, one of the, you know, the leading scholars about education regarding the pandemic challenges. She said that the pandemic has highlighted the disparities and access to digital devices and the internet. School closures in the wake of the COVID-19 crisis have had a huge impact on families and learning, and in fact felt most deeply in low-income communities and communities of color. She's talking about the US experience. Also had the equality problem because of the digital divide between the have and have not. More so in our country in Malaysia. I don't know the other country, but Malaysia also, even the penetration of internet becomes good in Malaysia, more than 70%, but still we are talking about the digital divide. And the future society 5.0 actually is very depend on the internet, the connectivity. But because of this equality the gap is become more and more and more. You see, that's why I quite interesting, because Linda talking about the US. The US technology is more advanced, and we are thinking the technology solve the problem. But the pandemic show that even the US also they have the problem, because the problem is equality. And Malaysia, we have the problem, the urban and the rural. Of course, the rural is more, it's not good about the connectivity and internet, the speed. But even in the urban area also have problem, because the socio-economic is different. Some of the families they have the very good internet connectivity and the gadget and so on, but some of the family didn't have. This is what I call the challenge, the most we have to address if you want to make sure they are really functional citizen in the future 2005 is the connectivity. We must reduce the digital divide between the rural and the urban, between the have and the have not. I think this is our challenge, the biggest challenge. Not only the infrastructure you must be there, but the second part, the challenge of the second part challenge is the way we teach our students. We cannot teach in the sense of the all paradigms of kind of teaching, more toward the what they call the teacher centered. Now, for the future, they must lead to the you give the gradually the responsibility of learning to the student. That was the student learning, the student centered of learning must happen in our system. That's why these two challenge. One is the challenge of the infrastructure, the digital divide must be addressed, and the second part in tandem also in our school, the way we teach our students cannot be in the all framework of teaching. You must give the the chance for the student to get the responsibility of learning, to become the self what they call the self-regulated learning, becomes a part and parcel of the life, and this will be contribute to the long life learning for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Amin, for the details given on the challenges in the infrastructure and also the challenges in the teaching method of ours for our students in Malaysia. Now let's hear from Prof. Yong. Prof, what are the challenges faced by Vietnam to make Society 5.0 a reality, and what are the initiatives taken to overcome these challenges? Over to you, Prof.
All right, so as for the case of Vietnam, I share with what Dr. Admin has just presented regarding the infrastructure. We are in Vietnam, we are facing limited financial resources for building lifelong learning, even though the state budget for lifelong learning increased over years, reaching almost 20% of the total budget, the state budget. However, it's still insufficient. And this is a big challenge for us. Even though IT development, rapidly in recent years, and it has changed the way people approach the knowledge, the way of living, the ways of reading, for example. And it is, an advantage if we know how to take that advantage. And another relevant to what Dr. Admin shared earlier, that motivation is another challenge. Because at university level, we provide them knowledge, we provide them with, technology, we prepare them everything. We think that we prepare them for their future work, okay? And because we give them kind of diploma. And how about after university? Because I can see in one of the comments from the guest is very interesting that are we observing the student, what's going on? And the knowledge that we provide you, the student at the university, can they apply it, in their real life at the workplace? Or they need more. So we need to observe them. We need to observe how to gain a knowledge at school and how the knowledge at school can be applicable. Dr. Admin also mentioned this one. And I think this is a very big challenge. So I think one of the possible ways to deal with this problem is to build a stronger connection between university and the employment sectors. Constantly, we need to do kind of a survey to see what they really need from our students, how our students can, meet the needs of the workplace, for example, what kind of skills they need, for example, because literally in theory, we say that we offer 50%, of the life skill and knowledge skills, but then are they really applicable, in their real life? It is another question. Yeah. And another thing that I think is also important is that for our case, like in Vietnam, ICT application in education is lagging behind compared to other countries in the region. For example, Malaysia, Singapore, for example. I'm not quite clear about China, but then yes, statistically, we know that we are behind you in terms of ICT application, and we need to call for the cooperation of the private, sectors. It is very important. And yeah, another thing relevant to what I said earlier, the motivation. Yeah, after school, when they got the certificates, when they got the diploma and get some kind of job, things that I learned at the workplace, things that I learned, after school, for example, is much more important. And that is really what we call the learning society. It's not learning from school. It's not formal learning. Yeah, so motivation so that they know that the skills, the knowledge that they gain themselves is important. Yeah. And I think that for our case, another challenge is that the lack of the enthusiasm from different stakeholders. Yeah, we know that, okay, yeah, lifelong learning is important. It is an inevitable trend for, different countries, to help learners, to help everyone to improve their knowledge, to, support their works, for example. But then enthusiasm from those who get involved in running in order to, facilitate people to get involved in learning at different levels is not really effective. Yeah, it's not really effective. And we have, as I said earlier, we have different learning center, community learning center, but then they are still underdeveloped and they are running not efficiently. And this is our problems, our challenges, okay? And so I think that, as I said earlier, in order to address the problems of learners' motivation and their awareness of, learning, gaining knowledge outside of school, it's non-formal, it's non-degree, for example, and how helpful they are, to support them in their, their workplace, in their employment, it is important. So one of the things that we can think of is to, strengthen, we try to strengthen the active role of cultural institution in lifelong learning. So I think that organizing kind of workshops, discussions, for example, there's one discussion in order to raise, not just the learners generally, but then teachers' knowledge, because they are the one who can shape very positive attitudes of learners towards, lifelong learning. And another possible things that we can do is that we can ask for public libraries to run some kind of activity. It is like a center for not just educating something formally, but then providing knowledge regarding tourism, health, education for different, disciplines at the same time. Yeah. So those are the points I want to make. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Prof. Yong, for the challenges that is faced by Vietnam and the connection between the university and the employment sectors are important to be given priority in order for us to cater for the sector. Yeah. Okay. We have a question for Prof. Yong from Shahira.
Yeah.
Prof. Yong, how is the implementation of lifelong learning in the public sector in Vietnam? Thank you, Shahira.
Yeah.
Over to you, Prof.
So as I mentioned that we had a project, okay, this project starting from 2011 to 2020. And throughout this project, we build more learning communities, community learning center in order to provide, everyone For example, at the city, citizens can easily access to the library. We have open library, and those library can provide with the e-books, for example, for those who apply, for anyone who want to get access. How about people in other areas, rural areas? It's not easy for them to, get access to library, let alone, community centers. So building community centers, providing them with vocational training, officially and unofficially. It could be online, it could be offline, if they have the, intention to learn, for example. It is one of the way that we are carrying. And another thing is that we have also running some kind of programs, for example, foreign language. In the big city, it's quite easy for people to learn courses, language, for example, to improve the language. But then in the rural area, it's not easy for them. So we offer. It's not a big program, but then still we having some kind of program to help them to approach to the language, for example, in order to learn themselves. The learner can learn themselves through the internet, because according to statistics recently, we have up to over 56% of the citizens using the smartphone. And this is a very big advantage for us. We can use a smartphone to, access different courses online, for example. So beside the institution, university that offer official courses, like the courses to help learners in their work life later on, we also have some kind of vocational training at all the areas in the country. Yeah, and the most important thing is that we try to raise learners. We try to raise everyone's awareness of the importance of reading. So we try to build a culture of reading throughout the country. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yong, for the very detailed explanation on the various measures taken by Vietnam. Okay, Mr. Fanjet, there is a question. What are the measures taken by China, especially in this pandemic season? What are the measures taken by China to overcome these challenges during this pandemic season? Thank you, Mr. Fanjet. Does China overcome the challenges by this pandemic during this pandemic season?
这里跟幕布局最大的几个挑战，我们是如何采取举措去克服它的？
在国内关于我们实施这个资源不均的挑战的解决方案，主要还是我们第一个是正式教育体系里面做到就是全面保障。非正式教育里面，我们也开展了很多的一些举措，比如我们让社区的资源，然后给孩子或者是我们的这个成年人提供更多的学习机会。第一个。
Okay. In informal area, we try to guarantee all the students have a very good education. And in the informal area, we try to strive our students to closely connect to the community and try to learn more real and practical skills.
在教育现代化的2035年的规划里面就提到要保证公平而有这个优质的教育，所以我们现在提到是优质的均衡化教育，所以城乡之间的差距是越来越小。
To actively respond to policy 2035, we strive to balance the uneven conditions between rural and the remote urban distance. And now we really did a great achievement among them.
全国已经完成了薄弱学校的提升计划，也可以理解是帮扶计划。
At present, we have achieved. At present, we have achieved our progress, and we have completed the weakness in our education system.
谢谢。
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mr. Fanjet, for the very detailed explanation. Before we end, Dr. Amin, what are your final thoughts on realizing Society 5.0 via lifelong learning for today's webinar? Over to you, Dato'.
I give some thought to be, to us to think of. The term learning, quite interesting. The term learning. Previously, we are talking about the learning. One of the part of learning is reading. Yeah, we focus on reading. Conventionally, we are talking about reading. We are talking about you are read from text. From a text. But in the future, even now also, our student less and less reading the text because of the telephone. They are more obsessed with the TikTok, the video and everything. Yeah, you see, this is our challenges, and this is this is some kinds of preambles of the society of 5.0. Now we have to rethink again the kind of reading we want to inculcate in our student. If we are really constrained with the reading with the text, I think we are not served the society 5.0. What I mean is reading now is a multimedia reading. How we give them a new skills of reading, there's a multimedia reading. The multi reading is not depend very much on the text reading. There are other kind of reading. You see, the multimedia, they're about the visual, about the hearing, it's all the multimedia. So this will influence the way of thinking. If we try to give them the skills of reading only on the text reading, I don't think we serve the society 5.0. We must thinking a new narrative of learning. One part of this is a new narrative of reading, not only a text reading, but the multimedia reading. This is my thought, it's not easy, but I think we have to reframe our kind of thinking to a new paradigm for the society 5.0. We cannot address these challenges unless we try to rethink our old paradigms. One part of it is a new narrative of learning itself. Thank you.
This will be a great challenge for teachers, Dato'.
Yes, of course.
Yes. Okay. Thank you for that insight, Dato'. Prof. Yong, how about you? What are your final thoughts on realizing Society 5.0 via lifelong learning for today's webinar, Prof?
All right. So I think that developing a true digital society is an inevitable trend, and the mission can be realized by lifelong learning. So we educators plays a very important role in motivating, inspiring, in shaping the positive attitudes of learners, in preparing them to prepare themselves for knowledge of technology, for example. So we have different roles, for me, for example, at school, educators, okay, those are our roles. But at home, very funny to find that my two children, they said that, Mom, I learned more from TikTok. So why don't we spend time on TikTok? Okay. You see that? Yeah, they have their own phones and then they access TikToks every day, almost every day. And interestingly, something that they share with me, I do not know. They are general knowledge, the knowledge that they can't learn from school. Yeah, I'm happy at the same time. Yeah, because the knowledge they share very useful. Okay, they can use in their life, and they just 10 years old, right? 10 years old and 14 years old. Things that they learn from TikToks, things learned from YouTube, very helpful. And that is also for preparing society for learning. Yeah, it's not just from school. So if we think that learning is just, framed from the school situation itself, is not, suitable to the future when we are approaching with, different sectors, for example, and we can easily cooperate with, institutions, with other sectors from, around the world. You can see that with the internet, with the smartphone, we can easily access, from different sources. So why not? And especially when we are growing very fast in terms of, economics. So easily everyone can own a smartphone to get access to, the knowledge. So the thing is that whether we can motivate them, to find the things to learn that's suitable to them, that helpful to them, that prepare themselves for the future or not. Yeah. Thank you. One more thing is that I can see a very interesting idea shared in the chat is that the MOOC, it is a platform for learning. It is a massive open online courses. Yes, very, very helpful. I joined some courses. It's completely free. Yeah, and it is self-paced learning. And why don't we, as educators, introduce this kind of program to our students, this platform to our students? Yeah, that is some point I want to make. Okay.
Thank you very much, Prof. Yong. It is actually our own initiative to upgrade ourselves. Yeah. Okay. Mr. Fanje, can you give us some of your final thoughts on realizing Society 5.0 via lifelong learning for today's webinar? Over to you, Mr. Fanje.
好的，今天聆听了拿督阿敏博士、曹迪彭通教授的发言，让我们对于终身学习和社会5.0有了更深层次的了解。其实，社会5.0虽然是日本提出的一个概念，但实际上是符合当今全球的大的环境。正如习近平书记在2015年的9月在联合国总部出席第70届联合国大会提出的构建人类命运共同体的概念一样，也强调了可持续发展和以人为本的重要性。在大数据的今天，我们更要注重人和自然的和谐相处，在尊重自然、尊重人类地位的同时，拓展信息素养，服务于人类的社会。今天的交流很有意义。
After listening to the speeches of Natu, Dr. Amin, and Professor Saudi Pongong, we get deeper insights into lifelong learning and Society 5.0. Indeed, Society 5.0 is a concept proposed by Japan. It is actually in line with today's global environment. Just as President Xi Jinping put forward the concept of building a community with a shared future for mankind at the 17th United Nations General Assembly at the United Nations headquarters in New York in September 2015. It also emphasizes the importance of sustainable development and people. In this big data era, we should pay more attention to harmonious coexistence between man and nature. While, according to the current situation of nature and human, we need to improve information literacy and serve the people better. And today's meeting is quite meaningful.
要感谢我们的组织者陈博士、朱静主任，还有我们今天的主持人艾玉玲女士，以及我们学校的邓楠老师。成都欢迎 ，Welcome to 成都。
Let me extend my great gratitude towards our organizer, Dr. Chen, and our president, and our Dean Zhu, and the Principal Luo, and our teachers, Deng Xianlan. Thank you so much. Welcome to Zhu. We're waiting for you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fanje. We at the Institute of Teacher Education, Technical Education Campus would like to convey our sincere appreciation to Yang Berbahagia Datuk Dr. Amin, Prof. Yong, and Mr. Fanje for their very informative input on realizing Society 5.0 via lifelong learning. Our appreciation also to all those who have participated to make this webinar a success. The lifelong learning recognizes that learning is not confined to childhood or the classroom, but takes place throughout life and in a variety of situations. Constant scientific and technological innovations can change the education system and have a profound effect on our society. Let's make Society 5.0 a reality via lifelong learning. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you, the guests.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.